In Hiroshima. This is Seek Sustainable Japan. Thank you so much for joining today. Today, I have the pleasure of talking with educator, author, editor, John Rucynski. Thank you so much for joining today.
Okay, thank you. I'm very happy to be here, and it's not raining, so that's good. I can be a little happier than I would be usually this season, so should go well.
Nice. Now, we have so many things to talk about. You have done this beautiful book, edited stories, A Passion for Japan. 30 different insiders, long-term international residents in Japan, many of whom I have had the pleasure interviewing on this talk show series. So how did this project get started? How did you decide I want to do a collection of Passion for Japan stories?
Right. So do you want the short version or the long version, the Ramones version or the Grateful Dead version? I would say, or somewhere in the middle.
Can I? Yeah, somewhere in the middle. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Okay. It goes back to three things, and one was. I did a series of textbooks with Alice Gordenker. Has she been on your show as well? Okay, add her to the list. Amazing woman. So we did this book, Working in Japan through Cengage. And the idea here was to interview people obviously working in Japan. And, that really inspired me that, I kind of stay in this English teaching bubble. So it was really eye opening to see all these, people, who are following different careers in Japan. And it was quite fascinating. So I kind of just kept that in my brain, what the next project could be. And I thought, instead of, working, how about, passion or what we do outside of work, because we know Japan certainly needs more of that. So that was one inspiration, just keeping, wanting to do more with this idea. And another one was just the, I'm a anthology collection junkie. Every year I get the best American sports writing, travel writing, nonfiction writing. So, and the great thing about these is, you always get turned on to new authors and different voices and topics you thought you might have had no interest in, just because the way of telling the story, the writing is so good. So I felt a bit of a lack of that in as a long-term resident here. I want to read all these English books about Japan and hear other perspectives, and there are so many great ones, but I couldn't really find many anthologies. So I really wanted to bring together a group of different authors. And so finally, just thinking for years, what could my theme be? And it really started with a lot of people I knew. And, you think of the people like me in Japan who have been here forever. And, they can still be quite divided where, some just are really still frustrated, rant a lot, can't really accept the culture, but they're just still kind of here. But then you get these real, positive people that and I was kind of looking for what it was that kind of separated these. And one theme I came up with is, maybe it's our passion, or, a stronger Japanese term, ikigai, why we get up in the morning. So I really just started with a few friends I knew, acquaintances I knew who had these, strong passions that I felt really helped them live smoothly, live comfortably here in Japan, because it's certainly not easy. And I just reached out to a few people, and they were all, very enthusiastic, said yes right away. So it really just expanded from there, thinking like, there must be more people out there. And so I was really excited just to put this out there and see what response I got. And yeah, I was overwhelmed with the response. And this book we have now, which you just held up, you see it's a big book, and I'll be honest, much bigger than I initially anticipated. And but that's completely a good thing. So
Yeah. Your story of how this came about sounds so similar to how Seek Sustainable Japan started in 2020 as kind of Corona desire to reach out and connect with other people as we were staying at home and to, go beyond my own boundaries where I am in Japan and find out what other people are doing and promote their good work. And then I've now done 400 interviews. So
Wow.
you might have a few sequels to this book. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm getting that question, and even I'm certainly keeping that door open. I do want a little break. As wonderful as this was, you always need a break after such a project. So yeah, but I'm definitely keeping that door open because I know this is really just scratching the surface. There's so many more interesting people out there. There's many chapters I couldn't include. There were no bad proposals. There were sometimes as an editor you want a kind of bad proposal oddly to come in so you can make an easy decision. But even the ones I couldn't accept were all perfectly good. It was just a matter of what fit in there. So yeah, I'm keeping that door open. So if people think they have a interesting story to tell, they can always contact me. And I can't say it'll happen right away, but again, the door is open. And what we're really excited about the possibility of is a Japanese version, because that's the question. I think more than are you making another book, the question I'm getting more is, will there be a Japanese version? Because, a lot of people in the book want to show their chapter to their Japanese friends, but a lot of them don't have the English level to read this type of book. So there's no definite leads on that yet, but it's something we're working on. And I really think, this will be good to, especially at this time, again, during COVID, where it's so controversial to let foreigners back in and these old, stereotypes to start coming back. So I think this book in Japanese could also, it's not just interesting, but also could dispel stereotypes, the old stereotype that if too many foreigners live in Japan, traditional Japanese culture will decline, or disappear, which if you read this book, you see it's the exact opposite. So
Yeah. There's so many wonderful stories, so many different themes. And I think there is that need for long-term residents to share their stories more. Because even in this series as well, we found so many long-term residents who are so invested in Japanese culture and traditions and bringing back old things from history and telling stories as they do tours and travel, and you've got examples of all of this in your book. It's wonderful. Let me just give a shout out to some people in the book who I've also interviewed. You talked with Linda Ding, who has a chapter all about kamikatsu, which I want to talk to you a little bit more in a little while. You had Wendy Bigler, who actually sent me the book, and she talks about her love of Japanese houses and the old, starting the Minka Summit as well, which I was able to go to, which was wonderful. Rebecca Ottawa, amazing writer about her house and being accepted by her house and her community and raising a family. Victoria, Victoria Yoshimura, who talked about being a Japanese Buddhist priest in Kyushu. It's just amazing variety of stories. And one of my first interviews was with Karen Hill Anson, and she's the first chapter in
yeah.
your book. So talking about calligraphy and her also acceptance into community and an old house and raising a family. So many wonderful stories there, but I want to start with yours, John.
Okay. Not the more interesting ones that you just mentioned.
Oh, come on. Yours is really interesting too. And you're new to this show, so I want to introduce about you. You talk about growing up as an army brat and your father being very enthusiastic about moving around and you were a bit skeptical, and you were always using humor as your way to diffuse situations and be resilient and get along. And you've also used humor in your teaching career. That's been a real focus of your research and your teaching, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. In fact, I just want to shout out one of your books, Bridging the Humor Barrier. And I noticed you've also written articles about using humor to talk about social issues. Do you
Yes.
want to talk about that just for a minute?
Yeah. So now I feel pressure to use humor on the show, but I'll leave that to you. But so start with the humor and social issues topic.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big misconceptions about humor and language teaching is that it's just for a laugh. It doesn't have value beyond just the humor. And as I talk about this, also I need to shout out. I don't have his picture to pop up, but my colleague Caleb Pritchard, yeah, you can see my co-editor on this volume at Okayama University, and yeah, he's just helped me do some amazing work. And we're in the end of our second Kaken grant now about humor. But just with the social issues, yeah, I just thought again, if you go beyond the humor, there's so much there, and I think a lot of this started with a first humor failure, and I think a lot of language teachers do avoid humor because of an early failure, and it's very easy for this failure. And my experience was the first time I used an episode of The Simpsons, and I was working with really enthusiastic, pretty decent level students, so I really wanted to give them something different on like a Friday afternoon class. So I thought this was going to be great, and there'd be all laughter, and they'd carry me out on their shoulders, and but just silence. They just really good students, quite good English levels, very enthusiastic, but just the humor was over most of their heads. So that really made me pause and think again. I didn't really have a goal for this humor. I just wanted them to laugh, which is a good goal in itself. But from that, looking more closely at The Simpsons, I thought, to make it more content based or make a connection with the lesson. So much of The Simpsons does touch on social issues, and I kind of was comparing that with, say, Sazai-san in Japan, where Sazai-san you have, well, with The Simpsons, you have the longest running animated series in the history of American television, and then Sazai-san, the longest running animated series in the world. But they're quite different. Where the Sazai-san is much more family entertainment, and even Matt Groening, the creator of The Simpsons, once infamously said, I wouldn't want my own children to watch my show because it is more mature. But just getting back from a pedagogical standpoint, I just found that if I could, connect this humor with some social issues, also do some reading about that, it would give a bit more of focus to the lesson. And so just one thing I've had a lot of good lessons with the topic of homophobia. And there is an episode many years ago when The Simpsons was still funny, but there was an episode where Homer is afraid that Bart was turning gay, and on the one hand, it looks like this awful show that's giving stereotypes about homosexuality, but if you look more deeply, it's completely opposite. That the show was attacking homophobia, and my students really caught that, and I thought this was a great way to show them that, because we don't get that as much in Japan. The humor tends to be a bit more zany and wholesome, not really as much connected to social issues. So, especially my students who were interested in study abroad, I want them to see how, humor can also be connected to those social issues. And What I compared this is going back more than 15 years, but do you remember the TV character in Japan, HG, Hard Gay? So it was just, we were all shocked that this was on American, Japanese TV. It was the man's name is Razor Ramon, I believe. He was a comedian and pro wrestler, but he was just wearing these outrageous, leather outfits that were just, this is the stereotype right here. And I compared that, and I was just really pleased that my students could catch that and say, we're Japanese and this is on Japanese TV, but we don't approve of this either. I mean, it seems like this guy is just making fun and making stereotypes about homosexuality, whereas we could see with The Simpsons that they're exposing that they're criticizing homophobia. So that was just an early gateway into the connection with humor and social issues. So I think it's very important, again, especially for students who want to study abroad, to just have, because especially when it's connected to social issues, there's much more risk of the humor being misunderstood, causing offense. So I eat whether or not they approve of it, appreciate it, find it funny. I think it's very important for my Japanese learners to be aware of how some countries in the world make this connection with social issues and humor.
Yeah. I think that's a really relevant point as well to prepare students before they study abroad. You had one research article. Sarcasm is so easy to learn. I love that title. So sarcasm is often very difficult to understand for second language learners, but definitely a part of normal communication in English. So that's another part of humor that you dove into with your students. They seem to get sarcasm okay after these lessons. What do you think?
Yeah, they improved. Sarcasm is one of the, going back to humor failure. A lot of teachers kind of say, I wouldn't touch sarcasm in the classroom. It can't be taught. So we were really inspired by that and thought, well, what are you really trying to teach? And the model we use in our book, which we modified from. I don't want to just talk about my own books, but another great resource is here, Humor in the Classroom by Nancy Bell and Ann Pomerantz, who have just done so much great work with humor. But again, going back to my point of needing a goal with the humor and being about more than humor. So our kind of model in this book was, there's kind of 4 stages to use with humor in the classroom. And first is just recognition, just to recognize or detect that it's a joke. And that might seem so simplistic, but it's not, because even people of the same language speaking together have to check with each other sometimes. Are you being sarcastic? Are you joking? So one is just the recognition, and then 2 would be the comprehension or understanding. So not just know that a joke is being made, but also understand the intent or true meaning. And then the 3rd would be response. So you need, in communication to, and that could be a positive or negative response, just to appreciate the humor, haha, that's funny, or to say that's not funny, which I hear a lot, or even just to use your communication strategies and again ask, are you joking? What do you mean? Is completely fine. And then the 4th one would be the self-production of humor too. So being able to produce your own humor in the target language. And you don't need, we're not saying that every time you teach about humor in the classroom, it's a progression from 1 to 4. Sometimes you might only be teaching 1 and 2, recognition and understanding. And that's kind of what we've done with sarcasm with our studies, is just starting from there. we don't want to create sarcastic students. The world doesn't need more sarcastic people, and so we don't want Japanese people, going to the States and saying, "Oh, the sushi here is so authentic," and making fun of that. But it's very important. It's so much a part of daily communication that they at least need to get it. And as an English teacher, for the past 20, 30 years, whenever I'm back home, I'm always kind of still in teacher mode and putting myself in my students' shoes. And like, if they encountered this situation or this situation, could they understand it? How would they react here? And I found that with sarcasm, I remember being we were in Oregon for a conference, and we took the bus, and the bus was like, there was like 5 people on like a 100-seat bus, so less than 10% capacity, and we're just about to leave, and the driver turns around and looks at us and shouts out, "Okay, no fighting over the seats." And I'm just trying to picture, my students would probably know all those words, but would they get this joke, and do they feel like they need to respond to that? So yeah, it's just so much ingrained in our culture. So again, we're not teaching our students to be sarcastic, but I think at least being able to detect and understand whether or not they appreciate it is another matter, but just simple detection and comprehension can go a long way in communication skills.
Yeah, definitely. I love that example. And it immediately reminded me of the confusion a lot of people have when they first come to Japan or visit Japan, and people shout at them, "Irashai," when they come into the shop. And then people are like, how do I respond to that?
Right.
Do I say thank you, or arigato, or do I say it back? Irashai, And it's something you have to learn, right? So even if you don't get the joke, or
Right.
get
Right.
the
Right.
sarcasm, if you realize it is a joke or it is sarcasm, even just to smile or
Right.
to
Right. Right.
nod that you appreciate that they've made an effort, that's pretty much a good reaction, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So that's part of it. Just a smile, a little laugh is a reaction too. Mhm.
Yeah. I love, let's go back to your story a little bit. So you traveled around America to different states, and then you later on, you just came to Japan even without a job. I love that story.
The good
And
old days.
this is before Google. You said your Google was Lonely Planet. I love that. And how you would get directions for job interviews over the phone and then scribble it down and then go try to challenge the Tokyo subway system, right?
Talk about, yeah, pure half exhilaration, half horror. It was just, especially I'm a small town boy originally, so yeah.
And then you later on, you went back to the States and then you joined SHIP organization to bring people around the world. This really reminded me of like the peace cruise, peace boat
Peace boat. Yeah.
experience, right? Can you
Yeah.
tell us a bit about that experience?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because the number one question I get about this experience is, "Oh, that's the peace boat, right?" Because we see these peace boat signs plastered, all over Japan for the past 20 or 30 years. But this is a completely separate program called the Ship for World Youth, or the Seikai Seinen no Fune in Japanese. And just to explain what that is and the difference. I haven't been on the peace boat, but from yay, okay, what I know about the peace boat is it's a longer program, goes to many more countries, but also much more expensive, and I think it's mostly Japanese people, of all ages, and I think they may have. Some foreign English teachers, etc. Because I do know some people who have worked for this program, but I don't know a lot of what they do besides travel. Whereas the Ship for World Youth is it's sponsored by the cabinet office, the Naikakufu of Japan, but then also organized by another wonderful organization called IYEO, the International Youth Exchange Organization. So what they do is roughly 120 Japanese participants join, and then they have a rotating group of countries in the world, generally 10 or 12 countries and about 10 or 12 delegates each, and they are welcome to Japan, and then they stay on the ship together with the Japanese participants for when I did it, my first one was the Ship for World Youth 14, which goes back to 2001. So now we're somewhere in the 30s. So I think we had about 45 days. Yeah, but just and the amazing thing, as I say in my chapter, is it's completely free. It's sponsored by the Japanese, um, by the Japanese government, the cabinet office, excuse me, and they fund, as part of international exchange, they fund the foreign participants, except for things like maybe healthcare, etc. And then even the Japanese participants do pay, but I want to say it's quite reasonable for the experience they get. You know, 5 to 6 weeks at sea, 3 meals a day, etc. So just an amazing, yeah. And you've seen the pictures there. So just an amazing experience.
And you said it's had a very long effect on your career. That recently you're adding some lectures from people you've met on that experience as a part of your SDG lectures. Is that right?
Right. Yes, some SDG, some other topics started more as just any type of, say, international exchange or international topics. But then now, my university, Okayama University, is very much promoting the SDGs. So we also have some people talking about that. So just, yeah, looking at the future, I'm in the process. And this is, as I say in my chapter, one of the amazing things about this program is just what an amazing network it has given me, both here in Japan and internationally. So last year or 2 years ago, I had a man, Futoshi Sato. Do you have the picture of the advisors again on the deck? There was about um, the other one. Was there another one? Yeah, this one. So yeah, the man on the left, Futoshi Sato, is just this amazing fellow advisor. Focus on him. This is the picture with my eyes closed from the sun. But the great man on the left on the camera, Futoshi Sato. So he was a fellow advisor on the program. He's also been worked on the Peace Boat several times. But he has his own farm in Saitama Prefecture. So he's very much into sustainable living. And I hadn't spoken with him in years because this picture is SY 16, so roughly 2004. And he spoke to my students about sustainability, and that was great. And then I was talking to him more, and he said, "Oh, I met these two, young, as opposed to me and him, young swires, Ship for World Youth swires, who I was very impressed with. So if you need speakers in the future, so yeah, I'm speaking with them now for fall lectures. One works with marine conservation, so she's going to be talking about that, and then another will be speaking about refugees, which is just great timing. I think very optimistic timing, where it seems like Japan is finally slightly more accepting refugees with the Ukraine situation, and a lot of my students are interested in that topic. So yeah, so those are two things coming up.
Yeah, wonderful. Those two issues, of course, social impact issues, the issues about people and quality of life, are as important and very connected to planet issues and environmentalism, as well as making income and economic, support those three, people, planet, profit, are things that I often talk about. And it's so nice to see that you have that diverse view as well, the diverse people and planet, not just planet or people. I think that's really important for education. A lot of people don't quite understand what is sustainability, how it's so far reaching into so many different topics, right?
Right, right.
Yeah. Let's talk about kamikatsu,
Great.
because we share a deep love of kamikatsu. And like we mentioned, one of your chapters is written by one of the founders of I Now, in kamikatsu. And you did that experience for 2 months. Tell me about it.
Yeah, that had been on my radar for a while. So maybe around 2015, I saw a wonderful Pechakucha talk in Nishinomiya by Sakano Akira, who was also one of the main proponents of zero waste and kamikatsu. So I kept in touch with her, and she also came and spoke to our students a few years ago. So kamikatsu had always been kind of on my radar, and there's a great YouTube video about their recycling program, and how, at the time it was, in that video, I think it was 33 categories of garbage separation, and I think they're up to well over 40 by now.
When
So
I visited, they were at 60.
60. Okay, there you go.
Most recently, it was back to 45. I
Okay.
think you mentioned 45 in your Pechakucha talk as well, right?
Okay, so I think when I was there, which is 2 summers ago, yeah, so it worked out wonderfully that, again, I'd always kind of had this town on my radar and thought it'd be great to visit. And then, and yeah, you can see why that one of my favorite pictures of the rice terraces there. So I'm pretty much every summer I'm home for a long time in the States, escaping this humidity and etc. So the first summer of COVID, I couldn't go anywhere, and I'm thinking, well, if it's safe, if it's okay to travel domestically, I'm kind of looking for something, and then just very serendipitously, this ad came up on Facebook. Still the only good Facebook ad I've ever seen, but and I kind of just looked into it and saw it, and it worked out perfectly, and did a little Zoom talk with Linda Ding, the co-founder of the program, and yeah, was able to work that out. Yeah, and
Since you were inspired also by The Abundance of Less, one of my favorite books, which features some people from Kamikatsu and that area, and how they're living uh, very sustainable lives, but very simple lives, and going back to real basics. What do you need to be happy? And you met one of the main characters of that book as part of your program, right?
right. So yeah, that's the amazing, wonderful thing about this program is it's not, you're not just looking around and observing, as much as possible. Linda and Azuma-san, and now Kana is also the new part of the team there. Just do an amazing job to get you involved in the village. And yeah, the amazing thing with that book is, I read it years ago, and I've had it on my shelf, and I really enjoyed it. And I never remembered, I never made that connection that, yeah, 2 or 3 of those people have these roots in kamikatsu. So uh, I think I might not have realized that until I arrived in kamikatsu and then got to the share house, and there was a copy of the book on the table, because Linda, of course, was heavily influenced by that book as well. And then I started looking through and like, oh, they're in kamikatsu. So and within that week, I was meeting 2 of those people, and spending full days with them. So yeah, the woman. the woman on the right as well is one of the co-founders, with Azuma-san's mother, I believe, of the original, zero waste movement. And the guy, Kiyohara-san, in the picture as well. I always remember his name because it's the baseball player, but this is the good Kiyohara-san, because the other Kiyohara-san played for the Giants. But I saw him in this YouTube video, which I'd shown my students for years. So it was again, a great thing in this program that I was actually there 2 days, volunteering side by side with him and getting his personal story. So yeah, quite an amazing program.
Wow.
Another amazing how it all kind of came together is, two of these people also have a deep love of Nepal, which is another one of my loves. And so it was amazing to talk to them about traveling to Nepal in the 70s or 80s. If you have that picture again of Nakamura-san and his stove, if you could pop. Yeah, what an amazing guy. This is a Nepalese style stove, and from his travels in Nepal, he remembered and diagrammed this and came back to Japan and built it by hand. So, what an amazing, national treasure, nestled in the mountains of Kamikatsu. So yeah, I spent a wonderful day with him in his, sustainable house, eating, talking, doing art. Yeah. And then, yeah, farewell there.
So beautiful. Such a beautiful, simple existence he has, right?
Exactly.
I also spent the day with him many years ago when I visited Kamikatsu, and there were no vegan vegetarian options. And I've been a vegan vegetarian for a long time. So that's actually how I was introduced to him, because everybody else in town was like, we don't know what to feed you. But we know that Nakamura-san, he's a vegan because that's just the simplest, most sustainable way to live. So he'll make you lunch. So I went up and I spent the day with him. He made me all this beautiful Nepalese spicy curry with chickpeas and everything. Absolutely amazing. And then rice, which is grown outside. All the vegetables he added were right outside his door from other farmers. So it was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. I'm sure you had as well. Now, you also spent time with Azuma-san, who's one of the co-founders. Really, it was her mom that started the movement, and she continued that momentum. She built the beautiful Cafe Polestar, which is one of the central eateries and cafes behind the movement there. It's one of the first places you'll see in Kamikatsu that has the stickers, where they're trying to be so transparent about the good work that they're doing for zero waste and how they're putting it into action. So a bit easier to understand than SDGs. This is exactly what they're doing. I really appreciate
Right.
that part of the transparency. You were working in the cafe as well?
Yeah, I volunteered 2 or 3 days there as well. So, this was just so fantastic. Yeah, to kind of get out of my comfort zone and do things I haven't done in, decades, since back when I was a college student. So, yeah, and I just, obviously a lack of public transportation in Kamikatsu, but I would make the hour and a half walk to the cafe almost daily, because it's just a beautiful walk there. And then a lot of, if could you put the picture of the cafe back up there? Is there one showing the counter maybe? Yeah, this one. So if you, a lot of my shopping was done there as well, because you buy a lot of your bulk goods, so coffee beans and rice, etc. And there's no kind of packaging, so you just have, your Tupperware you use from the share house, and go up there and buy in bulk. So yeah, that was again just seeing everything in action. So quite an amazing place, amazing program.
Yeah. Also at the recycling center where you're working, I love this part. You think all recycle centers should always have a dog, like a mascot. I love that.
Yeah. Well, I think I said every Pechakucha presentation needs a random picture of a dog. Well, I think everything, this,
Important. Yeah.
this interview as well. So we have our dog there. So
We
I
have
know
our
I know you're a cat lover, but hopefully a
no,
dog
no,
lover as well.
I love all animals.
Yeah.
And at the same center, you did point out also about the Kurukuru shop.
Right.
There are two types of Kurukuru shops. I always suggest that they change the names to make it a
Oh,
little bit easier. But one is a workshop where they get some local people to upcycle some of the waste materials, like the beautiful koi banners
yeah.
that they hang in the valley, make it into jackets and bags and other products. But this Kurukuru shop that you're talking about at the recycle center is something freely that you can take or leave things. And they say that they have an equal number, an equal weight of people leaving and taking every year in the community. It's such a example of sustainable success, I think.
Right. 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 And yeah. Another thing I love, appreciate about Kamikatsu is, oh, good. Yeah. Welcome, Z, for came in for the Kamikatsu talk. Okay. Do you have the picture with me and Azuma-san holding the leaves there? If you could pop that up again. Do you remember what these are called?
It's not maple leaf, not momiji,
No, no, I can't remember the Japanese name. And yeah,
but you do talk about the leaf business, which is
right, right.
really
So
amazing.
Irodori, yeah, okay. So that's another one of, because Kamikatsu, like a lot of these villages, is, aging, or shall we say super aging. So this is really a great, from long ago, this is a great way they've managed to, to give opportunities to the older generation in Kamikatsu. So most of this gathering and selling of these irodori are done, by the older women. So it's just a great way to stay active. And yeah, they're very ambitious, very aggressive in a good way about their business. Cell phones going and checking the market price, and they're sending these across Japan to use as decorations in Japanese cooking. So yeah, just an inspiring little visit.
Every time I see a bento with a plastic leaf, I always think they need to get in touch with Kamikatsu. They need Kamikatsu leaves. And I always give it as an example in consulting. Can you imagine making money off of leaves, off of your local trees? What an innovative, amazing entrepreneur idea. Did you visit the hotel, the main hotel, the onsen hotel, where you can do the walking tour of the leaf business behind? That's so interesting.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in that onsen, but I didn't do the actual walking tour of that. But
Yeah,
yeah,
so he introduced like they have little areas where they're showing how they grow the leaves, which are most popular, sending around the country. He actually said the colorful motted different colors of the persimmon leaf actually got the most money, and he showed us different leaves like lotus leaves, beautiful big ones, and then edible leaves like shiso and things like that. So yeah, fantastic.
yeah. So hopefully, we'll see more and more of this, because that is a feature of Japanese culture, the way to kind of minimize, but we need, again, these ways to, another good example of that, going back to my textbook that inspired me working in Japan. We included two Japanese people in here because we wanted to see Japanese people who are using English and how it helps their career. And one guy we were lucky to get, Shigeharu Asagiri. He is the president of Kowedo Beer, as he calls it, one of the biggest small breweries in Japan. And one of their kind of flagship brand is one made of sweet potatoes. And as you do know, though, Japanese consumers can be very demanding about the, say, size and shape of their produce. So he found these sweet potatoes from Saitama that were too small to kind of be used in regular cooking or to sell. So he managed to use these to make his beer, and so it's just a great example, like these leaves of giving value to something that seemed to have no value. That was the great expression of motenai. Like don't waste it, use it. So
Yeah,
that's another.
absolutely. Plus, in Kamikatsu, speaking of beer, you have two great craft breweries, the Rise and Wind and the Stonewall Hill. And they also are really great building up the community. They have that beautiful design, the reuse of all the old doors and windows as you come into Kamikatsu. They're reusing an old factory up the hill for the second brewery. They reuse a lot of old citrus peels in different brews that they make. You can take your own bottle and refill, just like the French wineries.
Yeah.
So there's so many great initiatives to experience there. It sounds like Z has joined. He wants to go and spend some time in Kamikatsu. You definitely should, Z. It's a great place to go and spend time. Like don't plan on a day trip. That would be a waste because it takes time to get there, right?
Right. And that's what I loved about that program is they said, why waste your time coming all the way here for one day? So I think my program might have been 2 weeks, or it might be down to 10 to 14 days. But again, just yeah, Japan's opening little by little, Z. So we hope you can get here as soon as possible. And also, Joy, I'm glad you mentioned the brewery, because I was afraid I would bring that up, and then all my friends would be like, "Oh, yapari, John, turn the conversation to beer." But yeah, another great thing there. Yeah, and you mentioned the refillable bottles, which that's although we have the craft beer boom in Japan as well, they're kind of missing the growler, what we call them in the States, growler culture, where you can fill and refill your own bottle, and that's what I used in when I stayed in Kamikatsu. The share house had a growler as well, which I refilled while I was there once, maybe twice.
Yeah, I take my growler everywhere, even to craft breweries in Hiroshima or other areas of Japan. I take my Kamikatsu growler if I'm going to a local brewery and I ask them to fill it up. And you know what? Usually craft breweries, they're happy to do it.
Oh, okay,
They're
yeah,
happy to fill up from their keg. So it's a
great.
great, if you love beer, it's a great resource.
Yeah, because I think the kind of spirit of craft brewmanship or is kind of universal. So even if they don't have the tradition in Japan, they're probably aware of it and happy to. So I'm happy to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, one of the other stories who I've had the chance to interview is Ted Taylor, and
Yeah.
his talk in your book, his talk on my show, and then in your book about his love of Japanese culture and tradition and music. And it seems like you have some very similar. You guys are kindred spirits with your love of travel and love of music. Is that right?
Yeah, and love of hiking. We've been for some hikes, and music, as we like to say, we like both kinds of music, the Grateful Dead and Fish. So, but it goes beyond that. But I think Ted's what I loved about when this book was coming together is the little themes that I thought, even if I have two chapters about sumo, for example, if they have a different perspective, why not use them both? So we did have a little section on walking and hiking, and so Ted's was in there. But I think another good thing about Ted's was kind of how he was forced to re-explore Kyoto during COVID, because he has worked as a kind of travel guide in Japan and for foreign guests, so he obviously couldn't do that. So he just talks about seeing Kyoto on foot, which I think is a great lesson to teach foreign travelers. Is one of the best ways to see foreign cities is on foot. So it's definitely a very creative chapter, and just gets these little nuggets of Kyoto that you know wouldn't get in kind of the 10 must do, 10 must see things in Kyoto type of thing. So yeah, that was a great perspective.
Yeah, I think that's so important, especially now when we have less tourists and you can explore some of the more famous sites as well with less crowds. But that whole idea that exploring your usual everyday views, but try to look at it with fresh eyes, try to appreciate it for things you may not have noticed before. I love that about Ted's article in your book, but so many others. There's so many others that I wanted to explore. I noticed behind you, you've got the Hanshin Tigers. You have somebody writing about their love of baseball. You've got a writer talking about Okinawa's dance. I love
Asa, yeah,
that,
Asa, yeah.
right? Yeah. So many fantastic articles and stories in here. And it really is, like you said, sharing your passion for Japan from many varied perspectives. I do hope you can get it translated into Japanese. I think that'd be very popular.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you did notice the Hanshin tag. I try to put some little Easter eggs there for the viewers, but that is one of my passions. But I found someone with much um, much better attributes, to someone who's done much more with his fandom, that could write a much better chapter in Trevor Rachura, and that was great. And
Are there any stories in particular that you were really surprised by or really stood out as something you hadn't considered before?
yeah, I think what was very helpful is I think I went into the kind of call for proposals with a bit too rigid of an idea of so I wanted this to be something very traditionally Japanese. I wanted it to be a kind of a turning point for you. But then as I started getting some questions from possible contributors, that really helped me to see the possibilities. So one of that was, someone asked, can Japanese people contribute? And I was kind of surprised at first, like, well, no, it's a book about foreign perspectives of Japan. But then I thought, well, on the other hand, especially if we have a kind of global Japanese or returnees. So from that question, I really did decide to open it up, and fortunately, I did get one between chapter 20 and 25 or so, Haru Yamada, who currently lives in England, and so I thought that would be great to have kind of the same with our Working in Japan book, where we're like, well, we should also have some Japanese people to show our students how Japanese people use English. So I thought, I thought this was a great chapter by Yamada-san to shed light on the returnee issue to Japan, which I hope is improving. But I know for her generation, to be a returnee, to live overseas and come back to Japan, it's something that should be an asset, but it was in her time at least, and possibly, unfortunately, to some extent, still today, it was quite, traumatic for her. She was quite the outcast, and even her teacher, she tells some horrible stories in the chapter about, her teacher basically mocking her for living overseas, and criticizing her English because she had to learn to speak English in the, say, Japanese way. So I thought that could come up where, I think, say, even for Japanese people, especially like returnees, where it might take them time to find a passion for their own culture, to find something they appreciate. And in Haru-san's experience, it was not just tennis, but her tennis coach's way of teaching tennis, which was focused much more on listening. And that's Haru's big kind of research area now, is listening skills, and something she learned to really appreciate about her own Japanese culture is the different listening skills and listening strategies. So that was a bit of a surprising one. In a very good way. And I'd hope to get maybe more of that, more Japanese or say mixed roots people who, sometimes have the struggle of kind of choosing between a culture, and they sometimes struggle with their Japanese identity until they find something to embrace about that part of their heritage. Maybe another surprising one was, again, because originally I was kind of thinking purely Japanese culture, but then when you think about what is that really, because baseball's not Japanese, but the approach to baseball is very Japanese. So that wasn't much of a stretch with Trevor's chapter. But then I had Simon Bibby from England asked me a question about, well, what about chess? And I was like, chess? I was like, what do they play chess at all in Japan? And then, but I was intrigued, and he had a lot of credibility with the chapter because, as you'll read, he actually represented represented Japan in the World Chess Championships. So it's one of these things where the passion kind of became a bit irrelevant. It didn't have to be, it didn't matter how Japanese it was. If you're experiencing it and following it in Japan and using that to acculturate, to assimilate, to interact with Japanese people, then it becomes your Japanese passion, your Japanese experience. So Simon was another good, surprising chapter, and with some humor. He's got a great story where when the first time he went to the chess championships, he had like 2 or 3 staff or judges make him move. Like, excuse me, sir, you're sitting in the wrong chair. This is for Japan. So it brought up these great things about identity. What does it mean to be Japanese? What does it mean to represent Japan? Where if we watch the Olympics now, an amazing number of mixed roots athletes representing Japan, and I think a majority of Japanese support them wholeheartedly. I would like to think so. So we saw that in Simon's chapter as well. Another surprising one.
Yeah.
Can I ask you, was there any as a reader, were there any that jumped out as you as like, I didn't expect that?
I have to say it was the Okinawa, the asa dance. Her passion for the dance, and then moving away from Okinawa, but seeing it performed, and tears to her eyes as she watched it. And I identify with that on so many levels, because there's so many parts of Japanese culture that I, as a long-term resident, am cheering for, and if I see it outside of its normal place, if I visit Hawaii or something, I feel really emotional and happy and enthusiastic about that. And so I think your book is displaying that diversity and inclusion of international residents who have really become a deeply embedded part of Japan without being Japanese. Like, what is Japanese? Like what you said, right? So it's a wonderful book. Thank you so much, John.
Yeah, could I touch on that chapter as well?
Go ahead.
So I meant to bring that up before when I was talking about having similar topics. So I had this proposal about Taiko by Daniel Lilly from New Zealand, which I very much liked. And then I got this other proposal about Asa, which is roughly a Okinawan version of taiko drumming, but also with dancing. I was like, well, can I really use both of these? And they're both great. And then I thought, well, why not? I mean, this helps to show the diversity of Japan, because I think around the world, so many people now do know taiko, but how many people know Asa? So I thought that was great. And another thing I love about Judy Kambata's chapter about Asa is, again, with Okinawa, you have this not always a great relationship with the military community and the local community, and a lot of controversies. But I thought it's great how she found something that helped her enter that community, and just so wholeheartedly and so emotionally. And same with you. Once I started reading her proposal, which started with a story about crying, I'm like, oh yeah, I got to include this, because this is what this book is about. That there's, it's, a non-Japanese in another part of Japan feeling nostalgic about Japan. Just there was just so much going on there in a wonderful way. So yeah, both of those chapters are fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. And the underlining theme, I think, of acceptance, that we might look like we don't belong, but actually, so many of the stories have so many strong themes of being accepted, being embraced by Japanese community and Japanese people. And I find that so encouraging and wonderful about this book. So you've done a great job.
Thank you. And yeah, that's something I really mention in the introduction, because when you look at one of the models of culture shock and acculturation, they call stage 4 acceptance, but I think that's only half the story, because you can accept your new culture, but do they accept you? That's equally or even more important. So I think that really came through in a lot of these stories. And again, when I was thinking of possible themes for a book, that's one thing that came up, like what how can you be accepted in Japan? And I think sharing this passion is one way. And going back to the Taiko chapter, Daniel Lilly talks about how once he got in with this group of taiko performers who were all kind of beginners, he's he kind of said, my nationality was irrelevant after a while. Once we were just people in the same circle or club trying to learn taiko, looking for something different in our lives. And he really shows in that chapter how you get into the uchi, the inside in Japan. And I think, again, sharing a passion, I'm going to watch my Hanshin Tigers tonight, and they've turned my hair gray with their performance, and they've broken my heart. But as far as being accepted in Japan, when I go tonight, I'm just another fan, sharing this heartbreak, and it is a community. And I think, again, the Japanese fans appreciate that. They really get a kick out of seeing foreign residents who have also become Tigers fans. So win or lose tonight, I can.
That's fantastic. That's a great way to be a part of the group. I love that. We also have serious carp fans in Hiroshima as well. Yeah.
Yeah. We won't get into that, but
Rivals with you guys, I'm afraid.
yeah, and we haven't beat you this year, so we're playing tonight. You're destroying us. Yeah. So
Oh, yeah. I'll have to tune in.
I won't hold that against you. And yeah, hopefully
We can be rivals, so we can be friends too.
Yeah.
Right?
Hopefully Susan or Naomi don't mention that too much as well either.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, John. Thanks for joining. And I will put the relevant links below to all the wonderful things we talked about. And Passion for Japan is available. So please pick up your copy at any good bookstore, right, John?
It's only, the bookstore of Amazon. So it's only available on Amazon, ebook or print version in select countries: Japan, US, Canada, Australia, England, and probably a few I can't remember. But yeah, just search on Amazon and it'll be there.
Wonderful.
And if you enjoy it, don't forget to leave a nice review.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, John. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you.
And join us again for another author interview this week. We're talking with Winifred Bird on Friday. She wrote the beautiful book, Eating Wild Japan, talking about food foraging. And we talked to her last year, right when the book was published. And this is a continuation after a year. And similar to what you're doing, John, or what you intend to do, she is working, almost finished, on the Japanese translation of her book about Japan. So bringing it back to the Japanese audience. So that'll be interesting. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Take
Okay.
care.